Test, test, test. It is Thursday afternoon, East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. It is rivalry week. It's an evil afternoon. You can feel it outside. The sun came out. We got people calling in. We're having a wonderful time.
Call from
Nils.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
All right, let's go out to Houston, Texas, formerly of the Horn in Austin, Texas. Nils Deco, an astute observer of Michigan State sports. He's got doors slamming in his house. He's got dogs barking. Foul moods everywhere. It's rivalry week. It's Michigan State. Nils Deco, an astute follower of Michigan State sports, an esteemed commentator on radio in Texas in a previous life. And he's going to give us some thoughts on Michigan State and the whole Michigan State football universe and everything that's right and wrong in athletic humanity right now. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. This is SpartanMag Live. Give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. We're going to hear probably from BetMGM and Shupan and Roback later on, but right now we got Nils Deco. Nils, we got a big football game going on. We got a basketball game tonight, Breslin Center, Michigan State exhibition, Bowling Green State University, but big football game Saturday, Michigan State, 14-point underdog in the BetMGM line. Last night of the radio show, Jonathan Smith, Alex Van Sumeren, Jordan Hall, I think was the other one. Michigan State, for what it's worth, there's confidence there. They think they're going to get it all together and shock the world and make something happen. There have been games that have been less shocking than this one would be, but for Michigan State to win this thing, they gotta button up a lot of loose buttons and tighten up a lot of loose screws. Your thoughts going into this one? Your thoughts coming out of Indiana? Your thoughts on Michigan State and the world of college football as it pertains to the Spartan Nation out there?
Does Bobby Morris have any eligibility left? Because we need like an 81-yard punt return, like in 84, 85?
84.
Yeah, I think that we need a 81-yard punt return from Bobby Morris, number 21 from Muskegon.
Well, his nephew's coaching in South Bend, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's probably I'm assuming, though.
Alante Brown,
one of the great Spartans of all time.
Alante Brown was a good returner when healthy, and he had an impact early in the season, went out with another injury. That's just one of a few players that could have possibly made an impact on this game. Your point, special teams.
How did he get hurt in the pregame, though? Didn't he get hurt in the pregame?
Alante Brown, I think he did. I'm guessing it was just one of those knee situations, non-contact. If it's a non-contact injury, it's usually a knee, right? And we've seen it happen before. I mean, I've seen players go down just by backpedaling, basketball players. So we never heard specifically what it was, but a guy that had some potential to have an impact in special teams in this game could have used it. Michigan State's special teams, since he's been out in terms of the return game, has been pretty much nil since then. No pun intended, nils. But yeah, no, Bobby Morris would be nice to have. Everybody remembers his punt return, 1984, like you said, 80-plus yards, 81 yards, and going into the end zone and celebrating with his future wife, wasn't it? Cheerleader.
I think so. Max Bulla's uncle.
Max Bulla's uncle and aunt. She was a Bulla, was she not?
Yep. It must be. You're the historian. I'm not.
All right, 5 minutes and we're already talking about cheerleaders, Nils. Let's straighten up here a little bit. Michigan State against Indiana. Your thoughts about that one coming out of that one?
I think they were better offensively, for the most part than they were from UCLA from the previous week. But still, just too many plays left on the field. I mean, we've discussed it, several times. The 3rd and 12 on the first series where Michigan State had a chance to get off the field, 3 and out. Just some mistakes in the back end, like that typically happen. You've got a 2nd and 17, probably 2 or 3 series later. There were opportunities on the field that Michigan State, for some reason, on 3rd down or in situations where the offense is in a tough position, Michigan State just can't make plays. It just seemed like Michigan State has not been able to make a play all year long when they needed to. It hasn't happened at all.
Especially on defense.
Especially on defense. I mean,
you go through that game. Indiana's got a good offense. They hit you both ways, all over the field, vertically, horizontally, run, pass game, good, excellent, great quarterback. But for Indiana to never punt in that game, not only did they never punt, Nils, they only faced, let's see, on third down, they only faced 8 third downs. They were only in 8 third down situations the entire game. Not only did they not punt, they weren't in third down. Michigan State did a good job keeping them off the field for a while, but it's kind of like running for Mike Tyson in 1985. Eventually, he's going to catch you. But Indiana's a good team. I don't know if they're great, but Michigan State's defense, capable of putting together 3 or 4 pretty good plays in a row, plant a flag, but their ability to go 10 straight snaps on defense without a fatal mistake right now is a step they need to take if they want to be competitive in this game. And we've not seen that demonstrated yet, and that is the main issue standing in the way of Michigan State having a solid chance to stay competitive and pull an upset in this game. The defense has to play at a level of quality control that we've not seen demonstrated yet. At times against Nebraska, the offense kept putting Michigan State's defense in bad situations, short field against Nebraska repeatedly. And Michigan State's defense on that day fought off the ropes and did a good job, even though they gave up 38 points. The tunnel screen, 58 yards. Malik Spencer losing leverage on that, and other mistakes here and there. But the defense rose up and played pretty well that day. Making a comeback against Nebraska, going up 21-14. Doing a good job with coverage, making Raiola get to a second read, and then the pass rush converges on him because he's not good when he gets to a second read, the quarterback for Nebraska. Other than that, Michigan State's defense has really not shown up this year. What's interesting is the Western Michigan game, and I know Western Michigan's not a great opponent, but opening night, Michigan State's defense looked pretty good. Not only did they look pretty good against an overmatched opponent, but a pretty good MAC opponent on defense. They played so many players on opening night. I think they went 25 deep on defense, and they were changing players like hockey lines. And it seemed impressive on that night that they were playing so many players and staying on the same page and staying fresh, and the second string looked pretty good on that night. Nikai Martinez was not on the field yet. But since then, they've played fewer players because they don't have as many available, but also some of those players have kind of bombed out, and they can't really trust some of those guys. But now when they do wholesale changes or change the look on defense, Michigan State looks confused more often than not. Even the level of communication at pre-snap against Western Michigan was pretty impressive. The level of communication at pre-snap in recent games has looked panicky and confused. And the difference is, remember going into the Western Michigan game, the talk was Western Michigan's got a new offense. We're not sure what they're going to do, so we are just focused on us rather than scouting them, and we will adjust as we go. And that's the best they've played all year in terms of communication, when they've just been focused on themselves and their base and the things they were doing rather than reacting to personnel groups and formations and trades and shifts and so forth. I don't know if there's a commonality there. Maybe they'd be better off playing a team without watching film. That's ridiculous. But when I look back at Western Michigan, there was a lot of fool's gold on that day. Your thoughts on Michigan State's defense?
I just think if you go back to that 3rd and 12, and you can see Rossi on the film, I don't know if you watched it, and you can see Rossi was frustrated because they had subbed out on that 3rd and 12
which
first series.
3rd and 12 against Indiana?
First series. You can see Rossi was frustrated by the personnel group. You can see there was a shot of him in the press box, and he was frustrated about the communication. I don't know who communicates that, what the issue is, but it seems like they get themselves in positions where they want certain guys on the field, and those guys aren't performing. I think, do you simplify things? You play 15 guys instead of 18 or 19. I know they want to keep their defensive linemen fresh. I know that's the one position, but it seemed like to me on that possession there was a communication issue. Maybe, like you said, I think Nash had his backpedal or his drop, gotten to Eaton's spot, and that kind of caused a problem there. But just
on which play, on that 3rd and 12, or a different one?
Yeah, on that 3rd and 12,
or the touchdown.
Yeah, 3rd and 12.
3rd and 12, cover 4 press to the boundary. Satchel checked in, Santiago checked in. Kind of a deep square, and had all kinds of time to throw. Went to the number 2 receiver inside. When they've, defenses I still think Josh Eaton is okay and Malcolm Bell's okay in coverage, but when an opponent needs to find something on third down, they're isolating Omarion Smith or Devin Cromwell or now Dontavius Nash, and they're finding something with inside receivers and mismatches if it's an early read man-to-man. And if Michigan State tries to change pictures, they end up confusing themselves. So it's hard to fix those things in 1 week. It's been a problem for 3 or 4 weeks. The chances of it getting fixed in this game, not likely, but that's a step they need to make.
But you're going up against a quarterback, this week that's probably more along the lines of a Raiola, which I think he's a first read guy. I think if you can change the windows on Underwood and make him go through his progression, I think you might find, some success. He's got a big time arm, so that he's going to go to his first read. Number one, McCauley, the transfer from IU, has been really good. I don't know if he's healthy or not, but the last time I saw him, he was by far the best receiver. And I think if you can make Underwood think out there, you might have the opportunity. Now, can you hold up against their running game, which is, probably one of the top 2 or 3 in the Big Ten? That might be an issue, over 60 minutes. But the only way, if you're going to commit to stopping the run, and then you're going to hopefully that, you can get Underwood maybe to make a mistake. Maybe he, first time playing this game, jitters. I think that's the way that you might be able to get an extra possession or two, because I think you're going to have to be +2 in the turnover margin to win the game. And Michigan State hasn't gotten a turnover, I don't think, since the Nebraska game, right?
Something like that. They only have 1 interception by the defensive backfield this season. That's a question in the SpartanMag mailbag we'll be getting to a little bit later. Yeah, that's just one of many things where Michigan State has to play like we've not seen them play. And, yeah, Michigan's running attack is good. It was good last week with Marshall filling in for Haynes. It's even better when Haynes is on the field. Haynes dressed, of course, for pregame last week, took his pads off, didn't play. If he's healthy and near 90%, he's got obviously game-breaking ability, almost in that Kenneth Walker category, a guy that can go 65, 70 yards on you in an instant if you have any kind of missteps, any kind of problem with run fits. And Michigan State has had problems with run fits here and there. Not every down, not every play, but they'll stop the run, and then they'll make a mistake and something gets out. Not necessarily due to just getting caved in by physical dominance, but by run fits, gap integrity, leverage on the ball, those things. Had problems against USC and UCLA on just basic counters. You say basic, those are hard to fit. A little better against UCLA with it, but UCLA was getting running backs into the open almost any time they wanted, which was really unnerving. Michigan State was a little better in the run defense last week against a very good running attack that kept a lid on Hemby, but the other guy, Kalen Black came in, had a couple punctures, did a pretty good job. But Michigan's going to bring that counter game at you and probably do it maybe with some no huddle. Michigan State's had a little trouble getting on the same page in general, but especially on no huddle. Case in point, that 28-yarder by Kalen Black at the end of the first half last week. Joe Rossi talked about that yesterday, and we wrote about it in an article in SpartanMag today. Talked about it in the VCast after the game. I thought, initially, I was wondering what Josh Eaton was doing running back to the uncovered wide receiver. I thought that he made, because Indiana had just picked up a 4th and 2, isolating Cromwell. He's open by 5 yards. Motion, declares man-to-man matchup. Inside receiver, I think it was Cooper, number 3, against Cromwell. Little pivot out, and he was open by 5 yards. And then they go no huddle. Good scheme. Let's see if Michigan State can handle no huddle. No, they can't. And I was wondering what Josh Eaton was doing running across the field. And I thought that maybe, because Michigan State was in 3 corners, a 3-corner package for 4th down. Didn't have a nickel on the field. It was 3 cornerbacks. And Malcolm Bell plays inside on that, and Eaton goes, I thought he was going over to the 2-receiver side, and then he sees West over there and Bell, and he's like, oh crap, I forgot we're in 3 corners. Where's the other wide receiver at? It's over here. I thought he was late getting lined up. Joe Rossi said after practice yesterday that it was a situation where Josh Eaton thought after the 4th and 2 conversion that he was coming off the field and they were going back to 2 corners. No, they were staying in 3 corners, and rather than Michigan State calling timeout, they let the play go. He's late, and because he's late covering the receiver, Malik Spencer's safety's over there covering the receiver because nobody's on him. So Spencer's way over outside the middle, and then Eaton comes back, and he's running this way as it's a duo up the middle, and Spencer can't get to where he's supposed to be. He's got an A-gap and run fit, so A-gap is wide open, and he goes right through there. And Spencer is late for obvious reasons, doesn't get a hand on the tackle. Cromwell comes in, dives at him, touchdown. The article I wrote yesterday, that might have looked like bad tackling or so forth, but the problem was at pre-snap. That's the second time that's happened this year when there's been a pivotal defensive error that I thought could have been solved by calling a defensive timeout. How many times did we see Mark D'Antonio all of a sudden just call timeout walking down the sideline? Now, he's the head coach. He's got the executive power to do that. He's the defensive mind, D'Antonio was. But remember, that was something we'd see from D'Antonio occasionally. He wouldn't like a matchup, and he'd just call timeout. And he would just put his head down and say, let's come over, let's talk about it.
But that's part of the issue. A lot of people.
Rossi's Joe Rossi, defense coordinator, is in the press box. What I don't know is whether he can, communicate down to the field level, timeout, or is it, I don't know where that is. When your head coach is the defensive overseer like D'Antonio, you can call timeout and get out of a situation like that. That play, if you're screwed up on defense like that. This is the end of the first half also. Michigan State had 2 timeouts. It's not like you're saving timeouts. There's only 55 seconds to go in the first half. Yeah, you'd like to save them for when you get the ball back, but was it worth allowing that play to stand? These are things that that they still have to get ironed out. But they're not going to beat Indiana anyway. But it went into halftime 21-10 instead of maybe fighting off the ropes a little bit more. And this defense hasn't been able to fight off the ropes since the Nebraska game.
But is that the engagement of the head coach though in that situation? How engaged can the guy on the sideline be if he doesn't see that happening? It just seems like a lot of fans have said that, some of the engagement by the head coach is kind of frustrating for people. And you don't see the guy talking a bunch. And I think that's led to a lot of people on the message board, kind of where some of the vitriol comes from is that okay, what's this guy doing in that situation? The head coach, if he sees that, do you think he calls a timeout, even if he is the offensive, he's more of an offensive coach than versus a defensive coach? It just seems there's always 5 or 6 missteps this year where, Michigan State could be in a game, and just, those are the critical things against a USC, a UCLA, a Indiana. I'm not saying Michigan State would beat Indiana, 1 out of 10, because I think it'd be really hard for them. I think Indiana's pretty buttoned up, or their operation is probably as good as anybody from top to bottom. But, I don't know if it's the fact that, like you've discussed before with these portal guys, you don't have them in spring ball. I don't know how many guys that are playing currently weren't in spring ball and get, the continuity, understanding what they're trying to accomplish on defense. It seems like to me, back in the old days when Narduzzi and D'Antonio had their defense, you've talked about, those guys were in the system 2-3 years, and then, year 4 they would start, or Roger Williamson, or, but guys like that work their way through the program. You can't do that anymore with the portal. So I don't know if you simplify your defense to the point where you're just hoping to keep everything in front of you, and then you hope the offense makes a mistake over 10 or 11 plays. But it sure seems like there's an issue there with continuity in the back end. It's every week there's always going to be someone that stubs their toe and it ends up costing you over time. Critical situations where Michigan State just can't get off the field on 3rd down, and just so frustrating. 3rd and 12, 2nd and 17, those are opportunities that, you pin your ears back. You're in a position where you don't let backup tight end from Wisconsin get out and run 40 yards on a screen, and then your safety misses a tackle because,
Indiana?
The leverage situation.
The tight end from Wisconsin. Yeah, transfer from Wisconsin. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, it just every game there's something like that. So can you alleviate it for 60 minutes on Saturday? Typically Michigan State plays their best game. I thought they played their best game last year for about 50 minutes against Michigan. Had a chance to win that, and Childs made that weird play down there at the goal line. Maybe it was a bad call. I don't want to revisit that, but Michigan State typically can cycle up this one last time to play their best game against their in-state rival, because Michigan State has more vitriol for them than Michigan does, because we're the little brother, and they're gonna smack us according to a few of their players, or bring the belt to us. So all that stuff that's on bulletin boards, it's going to be published, and maybe Coach Smith understands the rivalry a little bit better than he did last year, but you have to play your best game. And so Michigan State cannot afford to have any, plays over 20 yards. I don't know how many players Indiana had last week over 20 yards, but there were a number of them. And if you can limit those big plays and make Michigan drive the ball and hopefully kick field goals, then you might be able to, stay in the game in the fourth quarter. And that's all you can ask for against, a Michigan team that's got more talent, arguably, than we do, than Michigan State does. So I think that's the only way you can just, be +2 in the turnover margin, and, make them kick field goals, then, Michigan State might have a shot.
I think that Childs has done a good job avoiding turnovers, avoiding dangerous passes, sometimes taking sacks to do it, sometimes pulling and running to do it. Last week, Michigan State did a really good job game planning with moving the pocket, counter boot passing, ball control passing, throwback screens, those type of things, move the ball with that. In this game, Indiana has good pass defense. Michigan's a little different, a little more combative, a little bit tighter coverage. In this game, does the envelope get pushed just a little more? Maybe when you get down 10, 13 points, you'll take some chances on a 3rd and 11 pass that maybe you don't do early in the game. Childs has not done a lot of that, to his credit. This game he might need to. And it'll be interesting to see how he comes out of this. If he has another good game like he did last week against Indiana after 2 games in which he struggled. Nebraska, wind, good defense, no run game, no pass protection. Real hard for a quarterback to have a good game in those situations. Last week, no run game. Couldn't really trust the pass rush. Less pocket passing, more ball control passing. Worked out pretty well. Last year, you mentioned Michigan State for the first quarter and a half, pushed Michigan around. I was shocked by that. Michigan had a good defense last year, good run defense. And Michigan State's offensive line had been problematic, riddled by tackles for loss repeatedly last year. This year, a little more intermittently. But for them to come out and just pound inside zones and outside zones at Michigan, shocking. There was no hint of that. Now, Nate Carter came out and played the most energetic we'd ever seen from him. I don't know. He's an out-of-state guy. Had been in the program for a year. He had the Spartan dog killer instinct that day. I don't know what went on. A really nice, mild-mannered guy. He had been injured when he played for UMass at Michigan a couple years prior to that. He never shared with us exactly what got him going. I don't know if he was playing for his teammates for the program or if he was offended by something, but Nate Carter was different on that night. And I said that version of Nate Carter will stick in the NFL, and now he's done that. That was part of why Michigan State was able to run the ball well against Michigan last year. Nate Carter's not walking through that door. K'Ron Lynch-Adams is not walking through that door. Michigan State's running backs, to their credit, doing their best, but Tullis, Frazier, Tao Tolliver, none of those 3 are as good as last year's top 2 running backs for Michigan State. Among other things, Michigan State's not as good as they were last year on defense in some ways. So in some ways, this team has regressed unless they can turn it around right here. And fighting off the ropes, backed into the corner, whatever cliche you want to use. We've heard Jonathan Smith talk about it. I think Lindgren mentioned it. I think Nick Marsh mentioned it. I think Jordan Hall mentioned it. They're eager to play this game. They appreciate a rivalry game, all those things. They feel like they're close, they say. And not only to, making something happen, winning this game, not only turning the season around, I've heard them say they want to turn around the direction of the program. That's how important this game is. You come out and somehow win this game, the season's different. The outlook on Jonathan Smith is different. The direction of the program will seem different based on what they do after that. But going into a Michigan game, I remember it was like this a few times in the Bobby Williams era and John L. Smith era. And, certain checkpoints with D'Antonio, too, but D'Antonio didn't have any job security problems. But the feeling that they could turn the program around with this game, there's a lot there for Michigan State to try to work through and process as they're looking to play with emotion but not emotional. As D'Antonio used to say, keep the lion in the cage until kickoff. And like you said, and like we saw with Nate Carter, we've seen that with other players from Michigan State through this series. You will see a different level of effort in this game for a while, whether that is married with a good level of efficiency and quality control remains to be seen, but it will go up a notch as it should in a rivalry game, and Michigan will come in with different levels of motivation. That they like to kick this particular rival while they're down and their other rivals. Sharon Moore's been respectful of his comments this week. If Michigan wins, it'll be interesting to see what their level of sportsmanship would be after the game. Last year, not so good. Through the Harbaugh games, deplorable. So whether or not Sharon Moore makes a change on that, if they win, it'll be interesting to see how that goes as well. A lot of subplots, football, X's and O's, and otherwise. Before we let you go, your final thoughts on this one and where the program stands right now.
I think it's just a matter of, Nick Marsh having a game of his life, your tight ends, Masunis, Omar Kelly. You're going to have somebody have a Derek Mason, Nigeria Carter like in 1995, a TJ Duckett, Jeff Smoker, 1999. You have to have your best players have their best game. So Nick Marsh needs to go over 100 yards. I don't think he's gone over 100 yards all year, right?
I don't think so.
So, he needs to have, he's arguably, he and Childs, they need to have the biggest days. And hopefully, I thought last year Childs was really good initially in that game. Michigan State messes up, though. You drive, I don't know, what was that first drive? 9 minutes against Michigan last year. And then John Kim misses a 26-yarder and just, deflated. You control the ball for the first quarter. You can't have anything like that. They got to be perfect. You really kind of have to be perfect on Saturday in order to pull this off. It's under the lights. Michigan's, the prohibitive favorite, 14 points, like you were talking about earlier.
I don't know about perfect because I don't think Michigan requires that you play perfect. But we're needing to see as observers a version of Michigan State we've not seen. In that regard, perfection would probably be applicable as a term.
And no blown assignments in the back end, like you discussed. If you can get your back end, your linebackers, your safeties to be, serviceable, make sure that no one gets behind them. If it's 3rd and 12, be in the right spot. Make sure everybody's on the same page. Jordan Hall needs to be the communicator. It didn't seem like he was real communicative last week, so I don't know what happened to him. It seemed like he was erased from the game. It's probably one of the worst games I've seen him play because I didn't think he was as involved as he usually is. But I think he has to make sure that he is in constant communication with the back end and knowing who's behind him. I think a lot of times they forget who's behind him. Is it Devin Cromwell, who's barely played American rules football, versus the Canadian, he's a Canadian kid that's barely played any college football, and now he's on the field, and you don't know if he knows where to be. Same thing with Malcolm Bell. There's just so many layers of okay, what does this kid, what do these players really know? How much more information can you give them? I think maybe you simplify things, keep everything in front of them, make sure there's no 80-yard runs, there's no 80-yard passes, make them, take 12 to 13 plays if they're going to score a touchdown or take a field goal. And, shorten the game. You got to shorten the game like Michigan State did last week. They did a great job of shortening the game. They're going to have to do it that way this week, too.
All right, Nils, I appreciate you calling in. You take care of yourself. We'll hear from you soon. All right, be good.
Okay, have a great day.
There he goes, Nils Deco. Great to hear from him. And first of all, let's go. Hey, OJ Pimpson, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super chat tip in the SpartanMag tip jar. $1.99. Thanks, OJ. He says, keep up the great work, sir. Go green. It's great to hear from OJ Pimpson. And in the meantime, let's talk about what do we got here? Oh, we got Roback. You guys want to hear from Roback, Michigan State? Check out the line of Michigan State gear and attire. Is that the right word? It's activewear. It's Roback. There's only one way to describe Roback, ladies and gentlemen, and that's best fit, best feel. It's actually two ways to describe Roback. For those who aren't familiar with Roback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. As you see here, Roback has released some great new licensed items within the Roback Game Day collection. There are new novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs from some of your favorite teams, including Michigan State. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality level of activewear. Not just hoodies and quarter zips. Check out the everyday shorts and Delta Performance pants. Super comfortable, elastic waistband, and great fabric. Roback, it's the best. I got a promotional code here for you, MSU20. Go to roback.com. That's RHOBACK. Roback.com. Roback.com. Spelling is right there. See how it's spelled? Roback.com. Go there and promotional code MSU20, MSU20, and you will get 20% off for all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off on all performance polos, shorts, and more with code MSU20. Also, if you've not signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and you will get up to $1,500 first bet offer. Up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. First of all, if you have a gambling problem, just don't listen for the next 30 minutes or so, 30 seconds or so. But in terms of the $1,500 first bet offer, download the BetMGM app, signing up with bonus code ON3. That's ON, the number 3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. Go with BetMGM.com. I got some disclaimers here. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 and over only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 1-800-8-HOPE-NY in New York. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In Massachusetts, call 1-800-327-5050. In Iowa, call 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Puerto Rico, call 1-800-981-0023 if you have a gambling problem. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM.com, use bonus code ON3 and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. Also, while we're at it, let's talk about Shoe Pan. As you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen. The recycling rate has fallen, and we don't. Let's see if we can find something here. How about Lake Huron? You guys like Lake Huron, ladies and gentlemen? Let's talk about Shoe Pan. They like Lake Huron. As you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years. Michiganders are squandering $105 million per year by not taking back their bottles and cans. That's hurting the environment, people. We want to keep our lakes beautiful and clean. So help the environment, help yourself, help your beaches and lakes and roads. Take them back. Take them back. A message from Shoe Pan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to your Michigan State Spartans. All right, we've got some questions rolling in. It's going to be a night game on Saturday, Michigan State and the Wolverines. We might be hearing from Big Mooby here in a moment, but let's go out to the mailbag and see what kind of questions we have rolling in. Let's check the super chat, see if we got any super chats. We appreciate O.J. Pimpson. Is that what his name was? That was a creative name. Super chats, and we'll get you on here. Let me know if there's any problems we need to know over there in the chat area. All right, question 1 in the mailbag. The way this works is over at SpartanMag.com, the Underground Bunker message board. I invite Michigan State fans to post questions over at SpartanMag.com, and we field those questions. Spartan Mag Live pretty much every week. Question number 1, Desert Sparty from Phoenix. He says, Jim, the secondary has only 1 interception on the season so far, and that was against Youngstown State. What's the problem with the secondary this year? Let me check out a stat real quick. That is an alarming stat, and I was thinking about this last night, and I don't have a really good answer for you other than talent, a little bit of injuries. Nikai Martinez had 2 interceptions last year, has been out. Ade Willie would help a little bit, maybe not with interceptions, but just some cohesion there. So talent, the scheme. I'm not saying the scheme itself is flawed, but like Jonathan Smith said a couple times early in the season, do we have too much in? Does Michigan State have too much defensive volume in? And is that making Michigan State players not play as quickly and get out of position and so forth? You got to look at all those things. Let me see here where Michigan State ranks. I was going to look up. I was going to look up yards allowed per pass attempt, pass defense, Big Ten. Yards per attempt, Michigan State's 15th in yards per attempt, 8.2 yards per pass attempt. That's more important than yards per game. Yards per game, Michigan State's 17th in the Big Ten. Last year, Michigan State was, in yards allowed per game, Michigan State was 9th in the Big Ten in pass defense yards allowed per game. Yards per attempt last year, Michigan State was 15th, not as good. Pass defense has regressed this year. Lack of turnovers last year was in previous years, in the Mel Tucker era, was a problem. Last year, Michigan State had interceptions. Angelo Gross had 1. Charles Brantley had 3 interceptions last year. Malik Spencer with 1. Nakai Martinez with 2. 7 total. Without a pass rush, that's a problem. Only 10 pass breakups this year also. Malik Spencer with 3. Had a big one with a big pass breakup hit with a hard hit at USC was a memorable one. Fell off quite a bit against UCLA. A little better last week. Josh Eaton with 2 pass breakups this year. Malcolm Bell with 2. Chance Rucker with 2 in limited snaps, but 2 pass breakups, but doesn't play much. Ade Willie with 1. Willie's played 4 games. Haven't seen him since. Interceptions come with experience, come with talent, come with playing fast, recognizing things. And Michigan State's not good in those areas right now. If you have Martinez and Willie out there, you might have a little bit more cohesion. Maybe that would have happened. Michigan State, 10 pass breakups this season. By comparison, let's see, Martinez, 1 interception and 2 by linebackers, 1 by Jordan Hall, 1 by Wayne Matthews. And pass defense at the linebacker level has not been great this year, but they each have 1 interception. I'm sorry, Armorion Smith with an interception. He's the lone player in the secondary with an interception this year. 10 pass breakups on the year. By comparison, Michigan has 18 pass breakups. Pass breakups it's a difficult stat to put together, to accumulate, but Michigan with 18. Michigan with 11 interceptions. Indiana, 13 pass breakups on the year, 9 interceptions, 8 by players in the secondary. So Indiana, 9 interceptions, 8 interceptions in the secondary. Michigan State, only 1 interception in the secondary. The stats just look worse and worse. You're asking why that is? Talent, scheme, comfortability with the scheme. Again, not saying the scheme is wrong, but adherence to the scheme, application of the scheme, not good right now, obviously. Question 2, Jim from West Palm Beach, Florida. He says, I'm looking at this game from a simplistic macro overview. He says, I feel Michigan's offense is better than our defense. Yes. He says, I feel their defense is better than our offense. Yes. He says, unfortunately, this is where I've been so far through 7 games. And as far as talent, probably only Gulbin, Marsh, and Hall, and maybe Dunnigan, Kelly, or Childs would start for Michigan. That's a stretch on some of those, but maybe. He says, and Michigan probably has a better second 22 than Michigan State. I would say definitely. Do you share this view on talent disparity and what's our path to victory? I do agree with the difference in talent disparity. Going back to the Nebraska game, I didn't think Michigan State had a talent disparity against Nebraska. Just Nebraska made fewer mistakes. As this game unfolds, as physicality becomes part of it, can Michigan State play with physicality with Michigan for 4 quarters? Does Michigan State have a motivational edge? That's something they're going to need to have. Michigan's going to be motivated. Their coaches are going to try to keep the players motivated. Will that, in fact, be the case? They've done a good job with that in recent years. Can they maintain that? Can Michigan maintain that level of motivation? Because if you have a little bit of slippage there, you can allow a foot in the door and allow a little bit of the floodgate to open. Maybe not floodgates, whatever metaphor you want, but you're allowing an injured, less talented team that's on a losing streak a little bit of hope if Michigan does not come in with as much motivation. I'm sure that they will. They're athletes. They play 12 times a year. They'll be looking forward to this. They've had some tough games. I mean, at USC, at Nebraska. Last week at home against Washington was a big one. Oklahoma, they've had some big ones. Can they get up again for another big one? Michigan State did not get up for the UCLA game for whatever reason that was. Not a rivalry game, but sometimes teams are just flat. Michigan, in my opinion, better not do that. They could let this Michigan State team have a little bit of hope as it progresses, and that could be a problem. Let me text Mooby here. I think you might need the number. Let's see. We're after question 3 now. Question 3. And he also asks, Jim from West Palm Beach says, what is the path to victory? Path to victory. Yes, like I said, talent disparity is a thing in this game, especially on the second string. Path to victory. The path to victory is crap happens sometimes. I could use more colorful words, but I won't. Rivalries happen. These things, you have to hope for some of that rivalry magic to happen for Michigan State. Contain the run. Michigan State has to contain the run. Michigan State has shown sometimes they can play pretty good run defense here and there. Can they do it for 4 quarters? Have to wait and see. Got to do it in this game. linebackers have to fill correctly and with downhill ferocity. D-line for Michigan State's not bad. Defensive tackles, Van Sumeren, pretty good. Ben Roberts, not bad last week. He was sick the week before. They don't have the depth on the defensive tackle like they thought they would have. Satchel's come back and looked okay. Jalen Thompson, it was good to have him back in the lineup. Not really a playmaking difference maker, but they missed him on the edge against UCLA. Dunnigan's been consistently solid. D-line, although they don't do much in terms of pass rush, they hold up pretty well. They don't get blown off the ball all that much. If at all, Michigan's going to try to do it. We'll see what happens there. Got to contain the run, but even containing the run and being strong at the line of scrimmage is just part of it. With Michigan and Haynes and his explosiveness, you can play pretty good run defense. He can make a guy miss and go 70 yards on you. And Michigan State, that's if you're firm and you've hosted all the gaps, which for Michigan State has been an adventure. Not gap sound against USC 5 or 6 times, and those 5 or 6 plays got out. You do that against Michigan, gap sound, give this guy some daylight, he'll find it, gone. And you do that, you have to make sure that Haynes doesn't have that 60-yarder. Easier said than done. The Michigan State defense that has not shown that it can consistently play good for 60 minutes of gap integrity, run fits, and so forth. And Michigan's going to bring that count. It's not Michigan's pet play. They'll run it here and there, but after seeing the problems Michigan State had on it weeks ago against USC, they'll run that counter at Michigan State. Michigan State's got to run fit that thing. They did a better job of it. They saw it once, twice against Indiana. Did a better job linebackers run fitting that thing in a one gapping system, but they still didn't get the other guy over the top. It was the backside linebacker, and a play got out for about 20 yards on a counter in the Indiana game. Contain the run. No 70-yard runs. Michigan's number 3 in the Big Ten in yards per carry at 5.7, and Haynes' explosiveness has a lot to do with being number 3 in the Big Ten in yards per carry. Michigan rushed for about 175 against Washington. Looked pretty good in that regard. Against a pretty good defense without Haynes. In pass defense, Michigan State's got to play smart 11-man football, team concept, leverage, containment, same pageness. Again, something they've not demonstrated they can do. And if and when dialing up a combination coverage, make sure number 17, Samaj Bridgman, knows what he's doing. That's a former Wolverine, made a mistake in the UCLA game on a 3rd and 8. When Michigan State started that game playing well on defense, forced a 3 and out on UCLA. Talked about this in the VCast yesterday. And then Michigan State goes and I think scores a touchdown, up 7-0. UCLA's at 3rd and 8. Michigan State's got a chance to punt, get off the field with a 7-0 lead for a game that eventually got away from them. It looked totally different the first 10 minutes of the game. 3rd and 8, they leave the tight end wide open. Combination coverage, we might talk about this a little bit with Mubi, but on that one, Michigan State cover 4, zone, man-to-man, Meg everywhere he goes in the slot with Bell. Number 14, man-to-man, combination coverage. Jordan Hall in the middle, quarterback spy on Nico for UCLA, and Bridgman looked like he thought he was supposed to spy also. You got Bridgman bumping into Jordan Hall in the same phone booth. You should never have 2 defensive players in the same phone booth in the back 7. Santiago's running a stunt. He doesn't get to a stunt area because Bridgman's in the way. Bridgman blocks Santiago from finishing the stunt. Pretty sure that Bridgman was supposed to buzz out here to the flat because that's where the tight end went. That's where the opening was. Easy, wide open completion, yards after the catch, gain of 30. Because one guy wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. He doesn't play a lot, but you send him on the field as part of a certain package and a 3rd down look that you want to give. As Jonathan Smith says, are we giving these players too much? 10 guys know what they're doing. One guy essentially throws a block on Santiago. So it's like UCLA had an extra blocker on the field, and he didn't go where he was supposed to go. So on defense, it's like playing with 10 instead of 11. And on offense, it's like UCLA had an extra blocker out there. So it's like UCLA was playing 12 on 10 on that particular play. A 3rd and 8 conversion early in the game. They go down, kick a field goal. Michigan State goes for it on 4th down, gets stopped. They're up 10-7. Air comes out of the balloon. Michigan State, no resiliency the rest of the game. That play right there, same pageness, defensive problem was one of the turning points in the game, and it was born out of a combination coverage. Nothing too exotic, but Michigan State's inability to just carry out things like that have been a problem all year. They're going to have to do stuff like that against Michigan. You can't just run the same coverage every single week, and I don't think they're going to do that. So when you do change coverages, which is part of football these days, can Michigan State do it and stay on the same page? Can they do it and still have their run fits? Which was a problem with, late in the first half against Indiana. We talked about that earlier when Josh Eaton was running off the field, thought he was coming out. didn't call timeout. They run a duo, and nobody's in the A gap because the safety's over here helping the guy that was running off the field. I mean, it's Keystone Cops. You can't have Keystone Cops in this game. And Michigan, they see this on film. Just simple motion of a receiver into a stack release, making Michigan State communicate. Make Michigan State communicate. Chances are they're going to miscommunicate. Just on a simple motion. Just on, get a first down, you go no huddle real quick, put pressure on Michigan State to screw up. And so far this year, they have screwed up. So Michigan's going to do some things and send little quizzes at Michigan State. We've not seen Michigan State pass those quizzes. In this game, Michigan State somehow, some way has to pass those quizzes. Somehow, some way contain the run. Somehow, some way protect the passer. A lot of things Michigan State has to do like we've not seen demonstrated. That's just the way it is. But in this game and in college football, we have seen teams do things like that and show a level of just come out of nowhere and show something that we previously didn't know that they were capable of. It does happen sometimes. Looks like O.J. Pimpson is helping us again. Let's give him a little round of applause. O.J. Pimpson, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the super chat. O.J. Pimpson says, and if you want to have a question answered here on the show, super chat's the way to go in the tip jar. We appreciate that. He says, we can't do anything if we can't establish the run. So how will they go about that this weekend? Talking about Michigan State's ability or inability to establish the run. You got to establish the run. Didn't establish it against Indiana. It's got a good run defense. That run blocking has been a problem all year. The running backs are limited talent-wise. Mekhi Frazier's got a lot of guts and determination. Talent-wise, still just a second-year player trying to find himself as a running back. Might become a solid Lloyd Clemens type of running back at some point. But Lloyd Clemens was good in 1999 because he had a good offensive line. This offensive line maybe could have been pretty good. They were really expecting a breakout season from left tackle Stanton Ramil. Had a couple of shaky moments early in the season in pass protection. And then went down with an injury. They thought it'd be 4 or 5 weeks. We're getting to the end of that injury, I would think. But whether he's available, I'm not sure. I doubt it. Just hunch. I've not heard anything. Luka Vincic would have been a starter by now. So the Vincic that Michigan State was expecting and the Ramil that they were expecting, if those guys were on there and gained a level of cohesion on the offensive line, the run game might look quite a bit, maybe not great, but solid, something that you've got to at least have some safeties like leaning toward the box to help. Michigan plays a lot of 2 deep safeties on first and second down, stopping the run with the standard number, getting pass rush with the standard number. When you do that, there's more defensive traffic. It's harder to pass downfield. So Michigan State loves the outside zone. Haven't seen as much outside zone attempted lately. Just giving up tackles for loss in the daylight, and those didn't do it as much against Indiana because they're really good at backdooring and their one gap stuff in the defensive line. But Michigan State needs to establish the run. Then off of that, play action boot. And if the run is not established, those play action boots are not as effective because it doesn't pull defenders and create less traffic downfield. So against Indiana, you saw, because the run game wasn't as good, and against Michigan with the 2 deep safeties, you'll see play action boot, but it'll be shorter passes rather than play action boot deep, which is what they did a lot at Oregon State when they had a run game. Run game's got to be at least respectable. Last year against Michigan, it was respectable. That was Nate Carter, different offensive line that came out that day and did some things. We've seen that in this series before. Going back to the D'Antonio days, some mediocre Michigan State teams in 2016 and others, I think 2016, had a good opening series in run game and mentality. You talk to offensive line coaches, they talk a lot of it's mentality. I guess maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I didn't play offensive line. I don't know anything about playing in a game like this in front of 75,000 people, a couple billion people on TV. I don't know what that's like, but it's what offensive line coaches talk about. Sometimes it just buckles together and you can establish something. Michigan State needs to tap into some of that gridiron magic in this game to take first steps toward winning this game. But O.J. Pimpson, thank you for your question. Run game's got to improve. I mean, Michigan State's number 14 in the Big Ten in yards per carry average at 3.73, number 14. Interestingly, Nebraska's number 13. Michigan's number 3 in run defense, allowing 2.9 yards per carry. Last year, Michigan was number 4 in the Big Ten in allowing 3.0 yards per carry, but Michigan State rushed for 163 on the Wolverines, outrushed Michigan 163 to 119. And like we said, Nate Carter was pretty special last year. Don't have him this year. Who's worse in the Big Ten in rush offense? Michigan State's number 14 at 3.7 yards per carry. Illinois is number 17. They're worse, 3.4 per carry. That's surprising. I mean, the level of importance that Bielema places on it. And ironically, the worst rush offense in the Big Ten is Wisconsin, 3.1 yards per carry. Childs has to be dynamic. There'll be times when he's going to need to push the envelope without making the big mistake. He's avoided big mistakes this year. Washington with 3 interceptions, 2 deep in their own territory, turned that game around midway through the second half. And Michigan's good with their quickness, and I know they took a lot of criticism for what happened against USC, but USC's got a great offense. But Michigan's good with 11, same pageness, depth. They arrive with numbers. The first interception that they had against Wisconsin baited a hitch, and the linebacker went out there, and big interception in Washington territory. But just 11 men moving like a foosball table correctly, angles. You don't see many false steps, and they arrive with quickness, tenacity, things Michigan State needs. So Childs has to avoid those mistakes. He's done a good job of that so far, but it's going to have to push the envelope a little bit more to stay on the field because run game might not be there for him. So a lot's going to be on Marsh's shoulders again. They're going to, on Childs' shoulders. Marsh is going to get a lot of heavy coverage. Everybody knows that. He's Michigan State's best player. They're going to try to take him away, maybe with bracket coverage if he gets hot. So somebody else from Michigan State's got to come through. Omari Kelly, good, solid, slick receiver. Krishan McCray, good, solid slot receiver. Rodney Bullard, we've not seen him. But these guys, Kelly, McCray, Bullard, for Childs, if Michigan State's going to stay in the game, those guys need to make some high-level snags, special run after the catch, which is hard against Michigan with the way they converge as a unit. And some new wrinkles. There'll be some unscouted looks that Michigan State will try to spring on Michigan. Can they find some magic that way? Special teams, the punt unit, not much of a return game. We talked about this earlier. Michigan State misses Alante Brown. Michigan State's kicker has to be perfect, whether it's 2 for 2 or 3 for 3. And Michigan State needs Michigan's kicker to miss one. He missed one last week. I think he might have missed one against Nebraska. So all these things, path to victory, they got to roll a Yahtzee on all these things. It's possible. Question 3, let me read through these quickly. Dr. Fraser Crane in Seattle says, Comp, let's assume a coaching change takes place. Hold on a second here. Hold on. Apologize. Got some good comments over here. People talking about the mousetrap game and things like that. Where am I? Sorry for the delay here. I'm trying to find something. Hope everybody's having a great afternoon and a great Thursday. Rivalry week. Feeling like autumn in the state of Michigan these days. And Saturday night's going to be a little chilly. Hope everybody behaves themselves. Don't be baited into personal fouls when you're in the stands. I think fans sometimes aren't accustomed to having the opposing team sitting next to them and celebrating when something bad happens to your team. So stay out of those tribal instincts to lash back at them. They're yapping, doing their Walmart routine. No personal fouls. Keep the line in the cage, people. It's just football. Be good. Once again, use super chat for in the tip jar and post a question over the comments area. We'll get that question over there. Fraser Crane asks, let's assume, sorry about the cough there. let's assume a coaching change takes place at some point this offseason, he says. If you're Jay Batt and knowing what you know about Michigan State's history and the current landscape, would you target a current or recently fired head coach? Or would you be inclined to give serious consideration to a rising offensive or defensive coordinator from a current top program? If it's the coordinator route, would you lean defensive, considering how woeful we've been on that side of the ball since 2020? That is a big if there's a coaching change. Not sure that's going to happen. We'll see what happens this weekend and the rest of the season. You said if there's a coaching change this offseason. I'm not sure about offseason. I mean, if it happens, I mean, you kind of want to get a jump in November, I would think. You don't wait till the offseason. You don't wait till January. I mean, the thing has to be done. Like when they hired Jonathan Smith, it was the day after the season ended. It was Thanksgiving. You get it done before then. What kind of coach? You're asking head coaching experience or coordinator. I think head coaching experience. This is a muddled up puzzle here at Michigan State right now, and it's going to require a strong personality who can pound his fist on a table and make demands from his own athletic department, administration, and donors. Head coach experience. I know Dan Lanning was a coordinator, and he's got that personality, but so many things were in place at Oregon when he got there. Different type of situation. So that's what I would look like if Michigan State comes to that that crossroads. Question 4, Donan from Dowajak says, who will leave their current head coaching job first, Sharon Moore or Jonathan Smith? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think it's a loser leave town match, but I'd say odds are in Smith right now, but that could change on Saturday. Question 5, Chuck E. Slees from Walled Lake, Michigan says, he says, am I wrong in not really caring about the talent deficiency when the time management, nonsensical situational play calling, not having the offense play to its strength, and overall travesty of a defensive scheme seems to be much bigger issues? He says, I understand the defensive scheme can change with the defensive coordinator change, but the other 3 don't seem to be able to be changed, especially game time management. He says any sub-40-year-old who grew up playing Madden would run circles around Smith in terms of timeout usage in a 2-minute situation. You're not wrong about the talent situation. I don't think Michigan State was at a talent disadvantage against Nebraska. Nebraska just made fewer mistakes. And I'm not sure Michigan State was at a talent disadvantage against UCLA. UCLA began the season 0-4, but you saw some talent in the skill positions on that day. I thought Michigan State in the trenches was not at a talent deficiency in those games, and they lost those games back-to-back. The timeout usage that you mentioned, I mean, I've seen a couple times on defense when Michigan State needed to bail out a bad situation with a defensive timeout. We talked about that earlier. Time management, my brain doesn't have the short-term recall that it once had. But in these losses that Michigan State's had, I've thought more about shortcomings in run fits, assignment errors, lost leverage on the ball on defense, miscommunications, missed blocks, more so than time management problems on offense. Maybe I'm failing to remember some, but I don't remember time management being. There's been a long list of problems. I don't remember that being one of them. Maybe I'm wrong. Short-term memory, not sure. He says nonsensical situational play calling. I mean, people were ripping on the 3rd and 7 run last week, but and then that was just 4-down territory near midfield. I think that was just a case of trying to get to 4th and 4, and I think the offensive coordinator had 2 plays to pick that up. So that's why that's
big move.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
So I think that's why they ran it on 3rd and 7 on that play. Ended up losing 2 yards. Rakeem Johnson, who I've been curious to see what he looks like, got beat inside on that play in a run play. So then it's 3rd and 11. I think it was 3rd and 9 they ran it. Now it's 4th and 11, and that's when, I think maybe it's 4th and 9. That's when Childs went back and did the quick kick pooch punt, which went into the end zone. A lot of people were mad at the run play on 3rd and long there, but this team, they did it at Oregon State. They did it against Michigan last year. They will run it on 3rd and long, especially in a situation like that. That's a 4-down situation at midfield. So I think it's like it was 4-down territory, run it, set up 4th and manageable. Instead, they ran it and lost 2 yards. So when you mention nonsensical situational play calling, if you're talking about that one, that's why they did it. Makes sense to me. Other times, play calling, we can get into that a little bit more, but play calling becomes a difficult adventure when half of your plays, i.e. your run plays, aren't producing much, giving up tackles for loss, and many of your pass plays, if you get in third and long, you can't trust your pocket protection. Play calling can be a difficult adventure when you have a bad hand like that. They created the hand, so that's part of it also. We got Big Mooby on the line, ladies and gentlemen. He's a card-carrying Spartan dog. Haven't had him on the show in the last couple of weeks, but it's Michigan week. Great to have him on right now. Big Moob, how you doing?
Hey, fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
You okay? Are you keeping the line in the cage? How you feeling? You all right?
Man, I'm good. It's early. We don't want to be too soon. We got 48 hours to keep the line in the cage. So, we're good.
What are your thoughts going into this game? We've been talking in this game about path to victory, checklist. It's a long one. In a nutshell, my view is Michigan State has to demonstrate things we've not seen them demonstrate this year in order to win, which is possible, but the odds might be a little bit slim, but we've seen Slim come to the show in this series in the past.
I don't think there's any question that, we have to go out there and really basically play the best game we played, all year. Not so much because the opponent is that great. It's not what it is. It's just when you have such a small margin for error, it really doesn't matter who you're playing, that, mistakes are going to come back to bite you. So we got to be clean on offense, clean on defense, kind of get some balls to bounce our way.
Sounds simple, but that's a tough task.
It is. And I think you just got to try to reduce it down to the simplest terms and, control what you can control. And I think, try to simplify some things and really just get out there and figure out what plays you can execute at a high level and call those.
What do you think about
defensively?
Go ahead.
And defensively, just, really got to cut out the big plays. We've given up too many big plays and be a bit more efficient getting off the field. But again, these are things, like you said, that we have not shown that we can do on a consistent basis. We've shown glimpses of it and pieces of it, but over the course of a 4-hour full-quarter football game, we have not demonstrated that we can do those things consistently.
And Aiden Giles last week, a nice bounce back after a couple of rough outings, efficient last week. I thought the game plan was pretty good in terms of some of the shorter passing, moving the pocket, some of the counter boot, which has always been part of the playbook. Probably would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that in some other games when they tried to do pocket passing and had no protection. But Childs, pretty good bounce back, saying all the right things, showing some heart. Your hunch on what we're going to see from Childs this weekend?
Honestly, even the kid is pretty much doing what I'd expect him to do at this point. You see some of the mistakes, some of the setbacks, but he shows up every week and tries to help us out. And I thought they handled him a bit better. To your point, the game plan, get him into a rhythm early, and just having him make some throws that he's comfortable making. Not a lot of those low percentage deep balls that we were seeing. So I think game planning, and then his mindset is just, it's a home game. Your home crowd in front of you, a big game. Get him settled in early and see if you can keep him. Play him in segments. Basketball coaches always talk about these 3-4 minute segments. I think with Aiden, we kind of have to have that sort of mindset too. We're going to, play him in segments and keep him locked in so the game doesn't get ahead of him. And hopefully we can stay in the game long enough that we're not out of it or so early that these things don't matter, but just keep him locked in and playing, with himself, and then, just kind of live with the results.
Aiden Giles with an interesting quote this week when he said, he was part of the Oregon State rivalry at his previous stop in Corvallis, and he said this one is way bigger, Michigan State, after he played in it last year. Did that surprise you? That Michigan State's bigger than Oregon?
Yes and no. It surprised me from the standpoint that he thought Oregon State and Oregon was similar. It's not surprising that he found out that it's not. I think, but you don't know. People don't know what it is until you're a part of it. It's easy. You're in the West Coast. You don't hear about it, and most of the people kind of hype up the rivalry at the end of the year with other schools, but they don't really realize that this one it's different. And until you're out there, until you're on campus all week, and you're going to class, and it's not just any game. You're on campus all week. You can feel the energy, on campus, and folks are asking you're going to beat them, and so it's one of those things that you like to find out about it before you go through it. But the old saying is experience is something you gain the minute after you need it. So
I've never heard that before. That's a good one.
I think that's part of it. But again, having folks around that can tell you about it and tell you what it's like, but until you're out there, you feel the energy of the crowd, and you see those folks and following in the stands and their team on the other side. You don't really figure out that, okay, this is different. Even in warm-ups, it feels different. So it's not surprising that he figured that out. But sorry, my dogs are barking. But I think our kids will be fired up. I don't think that's going to be any issue. I will be extraordinarily surprised if you come out in an energy day issue.
Mm-hmm. You got to keep those Spartan dogs in the cage. It's not game time yet. Last year, Michigan State had a slew of players that did not know know much about the rivalry. Yet they came out and pushed Michigan around in the first quarter. What did you make of that in retrospect? Not a great Michigan State team. Pretty good Michigan team on defense anyway. Not much knowledge for the rivalry, but Michigan State came out and was the tougher team for the first quarter and a half, which shocked some people.
I think that interior run, that inside run last year, caught everybody off guard. The way our interior linemen were able to get movement against those guys was, they caught them off guard, and we're going to need a lot of that this week. I thought last year, we had some opportunities to take some shots with number 6. I don't think we took enough of, but now I try not to get into like questioning play calls and that kind of stuff. I'm not there, and I don't know what their prep looks like. But just as far as an overall picture, I thought we left some points, some opportunities on the field last year, and it'll be interesting to see what our approach is this year, because we just haven't been able to run the ball into in the inside well enough at all to see. But you got to try it. You got to keep teams honest. But I think we should pass the run, not run the pass. That's just that's a philosophical opinion, not necessarily what they should do. That's what I would do, just because. In kind of the short passing game, kind of long handoffs, get guys on the run, some of that stuff. But we'll see. I mean, it's always going to be tough to run the football, and they're saying whoever runs the ball, the best in these games will win. And I really believe that won't be the case this year. I think whichever quarterback has a better day passing, that team has a chance to win the game.
Did you look at Bryce Underwood last week against Washington? It seemed to me like they were doing more ball control, shorter passing, and got him into a rhythm, got his completion percentage up, yards after catch. Mm-hmm. I've not really studied it in comparison to what they've done all year, but I think there was more of that and a little bit less of downfield passing. Have you watched them closely? Would you agree with that?
They definitely made a concerted effort last week to get the ball out of his hands and get in their playmakers' hands, and they made some nice screen calls and stuff like that, easy completions. That the ball's out, and so there wasn't a whole lot of vertical passing game involved. That's smart. Get the ball out of his hands, let the playmakers get see what they can do with it. Mm-hmm. And I expect to see more of that this week.
Pretty good offensive operation for Michigan, I thought, last week. Doesn't look like Harbaugh's offense. There's some of that still in there, but you'll see shotgun counter. You'll see more of elements of Gus Malzahn in there. They'll do some RPO. Lindsey, the new offensive coordinator, is from the Gus Malzahn tree, and that shows through. So, and as Underwood gets more and more comfortable with that, with his mobility and his arm and ability to throw from different arm slots and so forth, there are some dynamic aspects of that. Whether Michigan State can keep a handle on that, again, Michigan State needs to show on defense. I've said this 5 times today on the show. It needs to play on defense like we've not seen them play. Needs to have a level of same pageness we've not seen. Nakai Martinez, it would help if he were back. I'm not sure. I've not heard whether he'll be back. It would be nice for Michigan State. It would help their chances if he were back. Conversely, if Haynes is out there, the running back for Michigan makes them much more explosive. And sometimes
for sure,
Michigan's offensive line is not great, but if that guy gets a little bit of a crease, he's gone and you're not catching him, kind of Kenneth Walker style. So Haynes, whether he can play, it's a big deal. And whether Michigan State can just get their run fits on counters and so forth, play after play after play that's needed for 60 minutes to win a game like this, again, also needs to be seen on defense for Michigan State to have the same pageness, the quality control. They've got to find that soon. If they don't, there's bigger problems.
For sure. Well, one of the things that you talked about, Michigan looking a little different since just kind of getting away from Harbaugh. One of the things I noticed is they don't put an emphasis on winning second down as much as they used to. I thought I thought that was one of the little sneaky good things about them is that they really tried to win second down. No matter what they wanted to get in third and short. So if you go back and watch them play, they were, pretty much all their plays on second down was to get them to third and short. They weren't really trying to go out there and hit big plays on second down. It was just get to third and short, let that offensive line, you got 3rd and 2 with that old line that could pick it up, or, easy kind of play calling. I don't see them taking that approach as much, but they do get the ball out and, a little bit more jet sweep, not jet sweep, but, wide receiver screens and all these different, you see more of that than you do sort of the, tight ends over the middle and stuff like that.
Last week, Avion.
But
Go ahead.
But as far as defensively, I just think, simplify the calls and have. I think you're a better defense if everybody's on the same page. Like if you could have this amazing play call, and if 9 of the 11 are executing and 2 aren't, it doesn't matter what you're in. So I think this week's call to action is just simplify everything, get your cleats in the dirt, and be ready to play when the ball snapped, and just everybody, all 11's on the same page. We're better right off the bat.
Sure. And I mentioned this earlier in the show. Remember the Western Michigan game? I think you and I were both impressed with Michigan State, playing 25 players on defense, running them in and out like hockey lines, and the communication before snap, playing with quickness. Communication was on multiple players. Western Michigan's not a great offense, but that level has deteriorated as the season has gone along. And I think it's ironic going into that Western Michigan game. One of the things that the coaches said was Western Michigan had new coaches. We weren't really sure what they were going to do. There's not a lot of there was some scouting material, but they were more focused on what we do at Michigan State rather than making adjustments to their personnel and what they were doing. Ironically or not, that was Michigan State's most same pageness game of the year when they didn't have anything on the opponent. They were better off when they weren't looking at I don't know if I'm looking too much into this, but as they've gotten more film on opponents, they've paralyzed themselves in some ways, analysis to paralysis. Smith has made the comment, do we have too much in on defense? There's some indications they might pare it down, but then it happens again against Indiana. You got different packages coming on and off, and you'll see the opponent run a motion, and you'll see Michigan State communicate, but it's not the decisive communication we saw against Western Michigan. It looks like more frantic panic communication. I don't know if I'm wrong about that. Would that be your observation as well, that when Michigan State does communicate at pre-snap?
I wouldn't necessarily say it looks frantic. I just don't think it looks like everybody's echoing the calls with the same level of certainty that we saw week 1 against Western. I remember just talking about it, like, look, Jordan Hall's directing traffic. You got Malik Spencer was out there directing traffic. Safety, same size safeties echoing to the boundary corner. Like, just everybody's getting the call. And it's interesting that was a home game, and it's really funny that folks may think the offense, no crowd noise impacts the offense, but you're a home game, crowd noise impacts the defense. And those guys were making sure everybody was getting the call, everybody's on the same page. And you're right, I've not noticed that same level of commitment to communicating the call all across 11 guys, down in and down out. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's, some injuries play a part in that, or, or maybe guys feel like the game plan is, we all know the game plan, so I don't have to echo the call. Everybody knows what the check is. I don't know, because I'm not there, but I definitely have noticed that you don't see the same level of commitment to everybody echoing the calls, everybody communicating pre-snap. And part of that, too, is we're late lining up a lot. Mm-hmm. We're late lining up a lot. And I thought, and that impacts how quickly you can kind of see the personnel and see what they're in down a distance and get a call in. So I think all that plays into that, being ready to go pre-snap, getting those. And I think what we're trying to do is I think we're doing a little too much of trying to match what their, personnel groups, what they're bringing in. And we're slow to sub. We're trying to use that slow to sub thing and see what they're doing. But that's not helping us get lined up, and ready to play. So yeah. I would like to see us kind of pare that down, pare the personnel groups down and have guys out there ready to go.
I think the slow to sub thing can be effective. It was against USC a little bit theoretically, and it might be effective in this game also when Michigan brings in different offensive personnel. Michigan State waits. Then they're entitled to make defensive changes in the rules today, and Michigan State is in no hurry to make those changes. I think that can be effective in running clock and shortening a game in a game like this that you would like to shorten. So as a tactic in that regard, I understand it. I think we will see more of it. But to your point, when you do it, you better carry out your assignments once the ball is snapped, and that's been an adventure. Last week, Avion, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like running a hurry, no huddle, and then you get a false start. Like, well, should you be running no huddle? Like, if you can't get lined up and not have these pre-snap penalties, maybe that's something you don't need to do after a big play. But again, I'm just looking at areas in which we can do things on our end that has absolutely nothing to do with the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
What do you, and Avion Gross last week played about 22 snaps. He'd only played 2 snaps all season. Joe Rossi was asked about it yesterday after practice, and he said we're rewarding guys that are he says we're not happy with what the defense looks like, obviously, and as they're trying to make corrections, they're looking at different solutions, and they see players that are doing well in practice and moving up the depth chart. Initially Avion Gross was probably 3rd string, probably on the scout team, but he's climbed back up into being part of the personnel group last week. Maybe not the most gifted, talented player, but if he's a guy that's going to be on the right page with Malik Spencer back there, that helps. Armorion Smith has played a lot as he's starting to wear down. I'm not sure he's limited in his own right. So Avion's in there. I'm not sure he's a big solution, but they're just trying to get 11 guys on the same page to carry out assignments and so forth and communicate. Maybe Gross can help in that regard. Your thoughts on Michigan State's pass defense? Jonathan Smith mentioned, talked about it a few weeks ago after a few losses that, he'd like to see tighter coverage. I think everybody would, any coach, any defensive coach would. But your thoughts about pass defense, aside from the communication problems, Bell, Eaton, West. West was tested a couple times last week in situations where he lost safety help and it wasn't his fault. Dontavius Nash was beaten inside on one play. Talking about when Aiden West gave up the 48-yard touchdown, he had no safety help because Dontavius Nash kind of bit on a little bit of a double move, basically got his ankles broken, off balance, inside, he's open. So the safety comes up to help Dontavius Nash with the person that Nash was just beaten by. That takes the safety out of the equation. And then West is beaten on the deep post across the field, maybe expecting safety help. It'd be nice if he had it, didn't have it, beaten on that one. The other one against Surratt. Surratt's just a great receiver, and that was pretty good coverage. Great throw, great catch, 6'2" man against an 18-year-old true freshman. That one, I thought coverage was good. His feet were good. That one reminded me of some plays early in Ronaldo Hill, his career, when he was beaten a couple times just by older, good players, but his feet looked good. And I don't disagree that West is going to be a good player at some point. I don't fault him at all on that one. And on the deep one, he would have been better on that play if Nash hadn't been beaten inside. It's a domino effect in there. Your thoughts about coverage in general, Michigan State, man-to-man situations?
I think really just comes down to being better in our technique. I think, and everybody on the same page. Like, you and I watch a lot of film, and there are times where it's just one guy. And I know we say this every week. It's just like, what is this guy doing here? What's that guy doing there? And it's one guy that's in the wrong spot. Like you said, it's a domino effect. We all see the film. We all see the games. And I think it just really comes down to just being disciplined in your assignment and disciplining your technique and executing. And, there's the whole thing. Are you good enough or are you talented enough? There's guys that are good enough, they're talented enough, but they're not good enough in that they don't, they're not sound in their technique yet, inexperienced, or they don't know the playbook yet, or they don't know all the calls yet. So right now they might not be good enough. And I think you're seeing some of that with some of the young players that they just aren't good enough, physically ready, and some of those other things, they'll show up, when you play an older opponent, guys that have a lot more reps than you. But you can mitigate some of that by not making mistakes. On the wrong call, or you thought we were in band and you turn a guy loose and we're in zone, or whatever the case may be. You can help some of that by just being sound in your technique and discipline and where you're supposed to be. And I think job one for us, just be assignment sound. Our pass defense, we know a pass rush would help out a lot, but you got to play with what you have. And right now we just got to be a bit more sound in our assignments. I mean, if you just go back and you watch the plays, it's always just, this guy should have been here, and that's where the ball went. And I mean, if the guy's there and they make a play, you can tip your cap to them. They're on scholarship too. But I mean, if this guy's wide open, that's what we call fight song. The other team's playing the fight song. So you got to just be, I think, for us, if everybody, all 11 are where we're supposed to be, I can live with the results of the play. Those are outcomes. You're not going to win every snap. You're not going to win every game. Those are outcomes. But if you're where you're supposed to be, and that guy wins that rep, then you tip your hat to him and you get back in the huddle, you do it again. But we're not at the point right now where we're just, where we're supposed to be, down in and down out. And I think that's what I like to see Saturday. Just be where you're supposed to be.
In terms of pure pass defense, we're seeing some guys like Dontavius Nash and some others that, just there's a balance situation. You're not seeing the inside technique, offhand jam, and just, smooth hips. You're seeing like off balance hips. I don't know if you would agree with if there's too much of that or if it's problematic or just part of football. You can't be perfect all the time. But Malcolm Bell, Josh Eaton, I'm not seeing those guys get burned a lot in coverage. Are you?
No. That's the thing that typically the corners, I haven't really seen any issue with our corners just out there just getting smoked, stuff
Right.
like that. It's not what it is. It's usually just, a structural breakdown. And I think if guys are just aren't good enough, aren't talented enough, and other guys making plays, again, nothing you really can do about that.
Yeah.
But when it's a structural, like they're draining the backside on an over route or something like that, and the corner's supposed to hinge and he chases or something, those are the kind of things that you can fix. Like just stay where you're supposed to be, play with the right eye discipline. I know these modern offenses, they throw a ton of eye candy, but if you just stay where you're supposed to be, it's football is a lot easier game where you don't worry about somebody else's job. It's a lot easier game. But on another note, we can't have guys just standing around being spectators either. Like there's plays where you see guys that are just it's 9 on the 11 out there because you got a couple guys just out no man's land not doing anything.
Right.
So it's all of that. But again, this weekend, it is. I'll be honest with you, this is a perfect. A lot of people. It's a great team, great weekend. If you're just assignment sound, because I don't think that offense really stresses you a whole lot with talent. There's some, they're not. The receivers are decent, but I don't think they're, anybody's going to be in a scouting report like if we got to stop number whatever receiver. I don't think that's I don't think that's the job. They're just going to be assignment sound, and they're going to go where we're not.
Uh-huh.
So if we're assignment sound, it's going to be difficult for that offense. For
the Michigan offense. And the offensive line for Michigan, I don't think is dominant. I think the right guard is questionable. They've had some injuries on the edge. Also, tight ends, they've had some injuries. Do those guys come back? Not sure. Last week on a 4th and 2, they had a stoppage where a third-string tight end missed a block inside the 10-yard line. So, like you said, the receivers, Marsh is coming along. Number 1's pretty good, but people that they don't really have monsters out there that scare the heck out of you. I think that's an interesting thing. And if Haynes is not quite himself or maybe doesn't play, then Michigan State's defense, if they are on the same page, maybe the defense becomes a shockingly surprising story in this game.
I mean, I don't think it has to be great. Like, I don't think we have to go out there and pretend we're the 85 Bears. Just be sound. Because I think our offense can score points. Well, okay, let me take it back. They've shown they can move the football. They've shown they can put drives together and move the football. It's finishing drives and those pesky penalties that pop up that are drive killers. We got to eliminate those. But we've shown that at times we can move the football in between the 20s and control the clock. And quite honestly, the way we controlled the clock against Indiana last week, if we could do anything like that this week, that game becomes a lot different because I don't see Michigan's offense as nearly as they're not in the same category of explosiveness as Indiana can put up points in a hurry. So you're talking about time of possession game, and you get a lead, and suddenly now it's we'll see. So I think just the game, the word, boys and girls, is sound. Let's just be sound, and we'll see where we're at in the fourth quarter.
Right. I got a super chat question here from OJ Pimpson. Great to hear from OJ again. He says, "Who is going to spy Underwood?" Who's going to spy Underwood? Now, usually it's going to be Jordan Hall. He was spying Nico. I can't pronounce his last name. I apologize for UCLA. But there was the one play you and I talked about. I talked about it here early in the show. Michigan State scores 7-0. They force UCLA to go 3 and out. Michigan State scores 7-0. UCLA's about ready to go 3 and out again. It's 3rd and 8. That was the play where Bridgman kind of got in the way of Santiago on a stunt loop. Michigan State's in cover 4 and it's combination coverage with Malcolm Bell on the slot receiver, man everywhere he goes. cover 4 behind that, and somebody was supposed to buzz, we think, to the press box sideline where the tight end does a crossing route, a little over route, uncovered, catches it, running catch, gain of 30. On that one, Hall looked like he was spying Nico, but it looked like Bridgman thought he was supposed to spy Nico. So if you're going to spend 2 people, and that's not the way it was schemed up, because they weren't really in a spacing situation that would look like a 2-man spy, especially when you're rushing 4 instead of 3. But to your point, know where you're supposed to go, know who's supposed to do it. It's going to be Hall most of the time. I don't know if they're going to spy on him every single play from the outset, but there's no question. If you cover well, he will tuck and run, and he certainly burned Nebraska in man-to-man a few times with the tuck and run. Good runner, strong guy, good acceleration. I'm not sure he's like an every down keeper problem that some quarterbacks are, because he's got all that arm talent to go with it, all the passing talent. But your question, throw the question to you: who spies Underwood? And I guess another question is, do you really need a spy on him every single play, or is that more of a third down situation?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's just, I think you let the game dictate that. I mean, obviously you have your rules, your basic rules that Mike's probably gonna be the spy more times than not. But I think you let the game dictate how often if you need a spy or how often you need one, because I don't think that's QB run. I don't think that's going to be. I mean, I think QB run for them is more tuck and run, more so than assign QB run. So I think the game would dictate how often we need to allocate the linebacker to spying them. But I think I think we just want to play a bit more zone. You just have eyes on them anyway. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to blitz and all that, but man, when you blitz and play man, it's just a clearer picture for the quarterback to throw into.
Yeah.
I think we should play a bit more zone, have eyes on him, and make him throw in the tight windows than have this clean man picture to throw against.
Yeah, and you can play zone and make it multiple. Cover 4, cover 2, cover 6, cover 3. You can do different types of things and rotate
right,
around.
Right, and I think the most important part of that is the different picture from pre-snap to post-snap. You're showing cover 3, and or you're showing cover 2. You drop in a 3 cloud strong or something else. Pre-snap, post-snap picture is probably more important than what you're actually in. Especially if you're just going to stay in zone. I think we should play a bit more zone this week and not give a running quarterback backs turn, guys chasing guys all around, and now he's got 30 yards of open space. That's just making him a better football player. Play zone, make him prove that he can win the game in the pocket.
And playing zone can also keep an eye on the run game a little bit better also. And if you're playing zone,
Absolutely.
You don't want to see 28 Nash drifting over and being shoulder to shoulder with another guy in the back 7, or 17 drifting, or Wayne Matthews, or linebackers taking false steps. There's just all kinds of drifting in zone coverage where it just doesn't look sound numbers wise. That's got to get cleaned up. Meanwhile, opponents, I mean, I agree with you that Bell and Eaton have been pretty good, and West has been pretty good. Rutgers been all right when he's been in there. He hasn't played much lately, but it seems to me opponents are looking for matchups. If you run motion and you declare man-to-man, they're looking for the matchup. Okay, who is Armorion Smith covering? And they'll isolate that. Or who is Devin Cromwell covering on 4th and 2 last week? Or who is Dontavius Nash covering? So the corners are doing pretty well, but they can isolate some of the interior defenders. They miss Ade Willie. That's where they miss Ade Willie. That's where they miss Nakai Martinez. Opponents are finding these weaknesses, whether it's Smith, Cromwell, or Nash, in key situations. If and when Michigan State gets you into a third down situation, Indiana only had 8 third down situations all last week, but Michigan State, above and beyond problems with communication in general, individual matchups, having trouble in the middle of the field there with those guys. Before I let you go, your thoughts on that?
I think, this is again, Indiana presents a whole different set of challenges just because they're so efficient what they want to do and they execute. Then that quarterback's, probably going to be a top 5 pick. So, they stretch in a lot of different ways. I think Michigan wants to stretch. Now, one of the things that Michigan really likes to do is they want to stretch you with shifts and formation changes and get you to declare what you're in. And that's why I think if we just come out and play a balance, try to balance the defense as much as possible, stay in zone, and just, tackle, make these guys go the length of the field.
Yeah.
Make them show that they can be patient. Make them show that, these guys want to keep catching the ball, getting hit, bring hats to the football. It might be a little damp out there. They might put it on the ground. Just, you can't give up chunk plays, make these guys earn it the long way. And, I think that's the game plan.
And the crowd's going to be into it, even with people having different opinions about the direction of the program, coaching staff, and everything. When that ball's kicked off and it's Michigan State, the Michigan State fans are going to be lit for a while. And Michigan State needs to take advantage of that and get the waves rolling, get it rolling, and see what happens.
I think the crowd is going to be really, really cranked up, and it's up to the team and those guys to determine how long that's going to happen, and how and what type of reaction they're going to get from the crowd. But the crowd's going to be in it, and it'll just determine what kind of game player to get from the team to determine how that helps or whatnot. But it's going to be a live atmosphere, and I don't doubt for one second that Spartan fans are going to show up and show out, and hopefully the team kind of feeds off of that, and we can sneak out everyone.
All right. It's great to hear from you, Big Moob. It's good to talk to you. Maybe I'll check in with you again before game time. You be good, you and your family and your dogs. Be safe. Have a good weekend, and appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me on.
All right.
Hey, go Green.
There goes Ron. There goes Big Mooby. Ron Armstrong, great to hear from him. And let's get back to, let me go through the rest of this mailbag, go through it quickly, and we'll let you guys get back to your day or night. Tino in Long Beach asks, how many points do you think Michigan State has to score to win this game? I feel a little bit more confident after the offensive creativity against Indiana. Still need a better run game, though. That's his question. How many points for Michigan State to win? I don't know. I don't know how to answer questions like that. 27. Question 7, Roxy in Grand Haven. Let's talk about. Now this is a deep question, and this is a little bit of a brain teaser. She says, "Let's talk about talent, scheme, and coaching." Last year, she says, quite a few players struggled with the new scheme, particularly on defense. Jordan Hall being an example. She says this year we've seen marginal improvement from players that Mel Tucker brought in, and surprising glimpses of Jonathan Smith recruits like Kikai Burnett, for example. She says, are we simply looking at players being asked to play in a scheme they can't adjust to, including the pre-Jonathan Smith players, or not coaching the players you have to work within the scheme, or both? Are we simply looking at players being asked to play in a scheme they can't adjust to? A little bit of that last year, Michigan State, they want to run the stand-up edge. They didn't really recruit to that in the Tucker era. Tucker was more of a 4-down situation, and Rossi's system was 4-down also, but one of them stands up, so it's not technically 4-down. They got the edge guy who wants to be more versatile, and Michigan State didn't recruit to that in the past. Michigan State tried to turn, what's his name? I forget his name, the transfer from Florida, into one of those, and he was just a guy. They went out to the portal, and Santiago, Isaac, number 13, and 44 Williams. Some of those guys, they're doing their best, but they're just guys. They're not dudes. So it takes a while to recruit, evaluate, and produce at that particular position. So that's one example, maybe, that takes more time. Well, actually, not a maybe, but a for sure. But you ask, are we running too much? We talked about the 3rd and 8 against UCLA as an example, and there have been other examples. Are we looking at players being asked to play in a scheme that they can't adjust to? I think it's more of what we talked about earlier and what Smith has insinuated, that maybe Michigan State has too much in. I asked Rossi about this last week. In the transient nature of today's college football, with more players coming in from the portal, it's a lot easier to get your system, to get players to adhere to your system when they've been in it for 3 or 4 years, rather than 1 year, year and a half, or 5 months with some guys that transferred in. So it's a new adjustment for coaches when you've got new eyeballs in the meeting room and you have a concept and you put something in and you think that they've got it, but you really don't know these players as well as D'Antonio and Narduzzi knew their players as redshirt juniors, as redshirt seniors, 5th-year seniors, being able to play with those guys. Like Narduzzi used to say that playing with Max Bulla was playing with a computer at linebacker. Now he's an outlier because other people have said he's the smartest player they've ever been around, coaches at the NFL level. But when you've got players coming and going and you're trying to play 20 guys on defense, they probably thought they could handle all these things, and they've blown a lot of rockets trying to get to the moon on this. So how do you adjust to that? That's what we're seeing play out in real time right now, heading into game 8 or whatever this is. The other part of your question about the offensive line, Roxy asks from Grand Haven, the offensive line, is this another case of scheme, coaching, or talent, or do we simply not have the right talent to work effectively together? Jonathan Smith bringing in guys from Oregon State seem to indicate the latter. Offensive line, Mahalchik, the offensive line coach, very good reputation over the course of time. He's built a good reputation over the course of time. He had a good offensive line at Oregon State. The scheme last year, too many tackles for loss. That was strange. This year it began that way a little bit as well. And had a few last week. You almost expect 2 or 3 run plays to get stopped for 3 or 4 yards. That can't be the it's hard to have a successful, consistent team when that continues to go on. There's signs that that's going away a little bit. We'll see what happens this weekend. I've wondered, they really hammered the outside zone at Oregon State. I'm wondering if, for whatever reason, that was easier in the Pac-12 than it is in the Big Ten. Last year at the end of the season, Jonathan Smith was asked what he learned about this season, his first season, and he mentioned the line of scrimmage, insinuating line of scrimmage in the Big Ten just different than Pac-12. He didn't come out and say it that way, but that's the way I heard it. So I'm wondering if some of those schemes, you can run those things if you have some great monsters on the offensive line. Did Michigan State run some of their staples last year and didn't have the horses to do it against the defensive lines they saw in the Big Ten? I think that's part of it. So it's not like, Michigan State's not running schemes that no one else runs. They're running stuff that everybody runs. Inside zone, outside zone, duo, some counter. So some of it is talent, working as a unit, injuries. Like we said earlier, they expected to have Ramil making progress. I thought Vincic was becoming the starter and was going to be a good, solid plus player, better than Phillips or Brocious, who I think are both competent players. But I thought you would have maybe Phillips coming off the bench with Caleb Green, and eventually you'd be starting with Vincic and Brocious. If you have Phillips and Green coming off the bench, instead Green is starting, and he's okay, but he's limited. Right tackle, then Connor Moore at right tackle. He's not been able to really just stay at right tackle and get entrenched there because of the injury at left tackle. Then you have Rustin Young coming in. There's a lot of teams around the country that have injuries, but I hesitate to cast full judgment on the offensive line when I do think at Oregon State it took more than 2 years to get it going, and this year there were a lot of injuries again. So it's hard to fix some of these things in 1 or 2 years on an offensive line. You need talent, you need depth, you need experience. I don't think it's scheme or coaching, although Mahalchik might be learning as he goes about Big Ten defenses and what can be applicable. What do we have here? Let's move on. I had more stuff there, but we got to move on. Question 8, Todd from Kalamazoo. Is Jonathan Smith, if he's let go before the season is over, who do you see being the interim coach? If that happens, that's a big if, but interim coach I'd imagine would be Courtney Hawkins. He's a high school coach, head coach at Flint Beecher. Michigan State, former player. I think that's putting the cart way ahead of the horse, but you ask a question, that would be my answer. Question 9, Josh from Plymouth Canton says, if Michigan State wins this weekend and gets 2 more wins and becomes bowl eligible with a record of 6-6, which technically is an improvement from last season, should the fan base then be responsible for flipping the narrative back to being on the train, or do you still think it's fair for Michigan State fans to be bitter towards Smith and the staff if they go 6-6? Big question, and that's really optimistic. I like your optimism, Josh from Plymouth Canton. Win this game, and there would be a tremendous glow. That right there would be huge in changing attitudes about things. Win 2 more on top of that to get 6-6. Maybe you beat Maryland at Ford Field. Maybe you win at Minnesota, which looks pretty tough right now, but doable. You get to 6-6. Yes, it would be. It would really change the tenor of the season and the outlook on the program. I think 6-6 is not a great record, but if you do those things, obviously some positive things will have taken place on the field, which would change some attitudes. You go 6-6 this year. I mean that Nick Saban's first year he went 6-4-1, 6-5-1 after losing to DiNardo in the bowl game. His second year, Saban's second year, they went 6-5. Then they were blown out in the bowl game by Stanford. They finished 6-6. So the great Nick Saban was 6-6 with a blowout loss in a bowl game in year 2, but there was optimism there. The bowl game blowout loss to Stanford was a little bit shocking. It stunned some people. It made some people question. But Saban had this disposition about him that there was belief that he was making progress, even though the wins and losses wouldn't be much different than the scenario you are suggesting. George Perlis in year number 2, they went 6-5, went to a bowl game for the first time in 20 years, lost to Army in the Cherry Bowl, and there were 75,000 Michigan State fans at the Silverdome. That was like a new thing for Michigan State, being a bowl game. Because previously in the 1970s, you had to win the Big Ten to go to a bowl game up until 1976. And there were times when Michigan State had bowl quality teams, like in 1974, the Levi Jackson year. They were a top 20 team and number 16 in the UPI, but didn't go to a bowl game because of the Big Ten rules at that time. So the Big Ten rules had something to do with Michigan State's 20-year bowl drought from 66 to 86. But when they went to a bowl game there in the Cherry Bowl in Perlis' second year, 6-5, then they lost. They were 6-6. But the thought was, man, we got some toughness. We're heading in the right direction. There was a lot of optimism. 75,000 people at the Silverdome bowl game, year 2, 6-6. Should it look like that this year if they go 6-6, go to a bowl game? Why shouldn't it? Mainly because of optics. Do fans want to see a little bit more fire on the sideline, a little more control on the sideline? Do they want to see fewer mistakes on defense? All of those things. Those things need to be fixed, especially on defense and the offensive line and the run game, in order to get to 6-6. If that happens and they get to 6-6, it'll be a surprise, whereas the Perlis thing was more of a hopeful build. The Saban thing was more of a hopeful build with success from the Perlis era, not so much in the too distant past. This type of situation, it just feels different. Maybe because every game is on TV. When Perlis was building it, every game was not on TV. You just saw the results. Is it different now because of social media and people reacting differently? Maybe all those things. But the optics need to look good on the sideline. The optics need to look better on defense. Same pageness, accountability, quality control, those things. But mathematically, the scenario you present, not much different than Perlis and Saban and the way they were getting it started. And I wasn't around to really witness Darryl Rogers getting it started. I remember 1978 and that season and so forth, but I don't remember really the tenor as it was attempted to get built. I do remember the roses don't grow in muddy waters era, and there was never any positive belief there. D'Antonio went 7-5 in his first year, lost his first bowl game, went 7-6. Year 2, they went 9-3. Big Ten was weaker back then, and they lost to a really talented Georgia team in the bowl in Florida. Matthew Stafford, quarterback, Noshawn Marino, running back. Georgia was preseason number 1 that year. Michigan State 9-3 sneaked into that bowl game, and they were okay, and they were kind of in it, and then fell apart a little bit in the fourth quarter. But D'Antonio's second year was different. Like I said, it should feel more like Perlis' second year, but it doesn't right now, no question. And there's just as good a chance right now that they end up 4-8 as 6-6 or 3-9. So question 10, good question though. Question 10, this is Vic from Stevensville, home of the Lakeshore Lancers. He says, hello Comp, have you ever thought about issuing a special print edition of Spartan Magazine? A special edition, the old magazine he's talking about. Maybe fill it with your favorite old articles and pictures and some commentary up front about your experience as the editor over 30 years. I'd sure buy one. Thank you for that comment. If you just do a one-off magazine, it's hard to sell enough to pay for printing and postage. We would have the mechanism with SpartanMag with the number of subscribers we have that affects the number of those people bought one. It might make sense, but no plans for something like that right now. But I do have some old copies from the 2000 National Championship season. I've got a few of those that we may sell at some point. And also, I think it's the 2013 Rose Bowl season, had a glossy cover and just some retrospective looks back at that season as it went along. It was kind of a special issue. We've got some of those that we might put out there for sale. And if we do, I don't have a lot of them, so they'd be like $25 a piece or so. That could happen at some point. I meant to do that during COVID and never quite happened because I ended up being more busy in COVID than I expected because recruiting was pretty heavy at that time. Question 11, Matt from Glen Ellen, Illinois. He says, you may not be able to answer this one, or you can plead the fifth. He says, if forced to answer, do you truly believe Michigan State has that many season-ending long-term injuries? Does Michigan State really have this many season-ending long-term injuries, he's asking. He says, or are some a product of the current environment, both in college football and the uncertainty at Michigan State? I hear where you're going with this, and you're right about some things. There are some season-ending injuries, and there are some guys that are opting out for red shirts. And at least 2, I think one was reported elsewhere. But yeah, that is happening because of the way the season's going and people thinking about themselves first. And that's one of the things that happens when a season starts going badly. Individuals start thinking about themselves. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's just something that happens. Any other questions that want to come up here on the comments area? We will field questions over there via Super Chat if you want, if you feel so inclined to do that. Question 12, George in Jackson, Michigan says, hi, Jim. Does it seem obvious that the game plan is to stop the run? Does it seem too obvious that the game plan against Michigan is to stop the run and force Underwood to throw? Do you anticipate Rossi loading the box this weekend, George and Jackson? Yes, got to stop the run always. They always want to do that. Not always the most successful at it. They've had some success here and there. Last play against Michigan last year, Michigan State didn't load the box, and it was a quarterback run, and they had 2 safeties deep for some reason. I don't know if that was a communication error or what. I'm talking about the Michigan game last year when Michigan needed a first down to close out the game, and Michigan is against a quarterback who could not throw it, and you kind of know he's going to run it, and Michigan State still had 2 safeties deep on that play. I don't know if that was a signal error or what. So stuffing the box first and second down, it's not something we see Michigan State do. They've not really faced a run-first team yet. Indiana was balanced. USC was balanced. UCLA was balanced. Nebraska was balanced. They're all pretty balanced. Boston College was run-first. So it's not like they've faced like a Wisconsin, Iowa-type run-oriented outfit. Might we see more 8-man boxes here with single safety, maybe cover 3 zone behind it? Yeah, that would make sense. Wouldn't be surprised. I'm not really sure. In the short passing game, with the way Michigan did it last week, if you're man-to-man, you got to make sure you don't get caught in the wash on some of those crossers and slide routes and drags and so forth, as they did on a 3rd and 4 last week. Jordan Hall had trouble getting through the wash to get out on a little dump to the running back that got out for about 15 yards or so. Question 13, Jason in Crozet, Virginia. Do you think we hear from Jay Batt anytime soon? Can you put yourself in his shoes and ponder what he might be thinking? I realize it's not his job to be reactive to the fan base, but he has to know there's significant discontent amongst an increasingly larger group of dedicated fans. If you were him, would you provide some type of supportive statement that we've seen from other athletic directors around the country? Question from Jason in Virginia. Will we hear from Jay Batt soon, as you said? If at all, I don't think we'd hear from him until maybe after the Minnesota game. In his shoes, I'm sure he was wishing he wasn't saddled with this type of situation this year in year 1. He's got other financial situations in the athletic department they need to solve. They don't need to be trying to figure out a $30 million buyout. A supportive statement, those are often seen as a kiss of death, so I think it's better not to do that. Wisconsin put out one this week. Florida State said they're going to evaluate at the end of the season, which sounds like Norvell's going to be done at Florida State. Michigan State, I don't think is there yet. It's year 2. It's not year 4 for Jonathan Smith, so I don't think you need to give a statement like they did at Florida State and Wisconsin. That being said, if you issue a statement of support in year 2, some people would take it as a sign of panic and not support. So I think Batt's been smart at this point, is to stay in the background. He was at the game last week, and he was around media, but not completely accessible. So we'll see what happens, and I understand that also. We'll see what happens going forward. We'll see how competitive Michigan State is on Saturday. If Michigan State wins, that could happen. That could happen. That could change a lot of things. Question 14, Michigan State DeBest is his name. He's from Traverse City, Michigan. He says, what are your thoughts on PJ Fleck? This guy says he's a guy that is kind of corny with the row the boat stuff, but he has averaged 8 wins at Minnesota and would want to come to Michigan State. Parentheses, I think it was reported he reached out during both searches, in parentheses. He says, excluding his first year at Western Michigan, his overall coaching record winning percentage is 64%. I think he has reached the limit at Minnesota based on talent, and he would have access to a lot better skill and talent at Michigan State. Do you think he is a guy who could flourish at Michigan State? A lot of people's concern with him is he is what they call mid, but I think part of that is access to talent at Minnesota. Any thoughts? So that's a question from Michigan to Best from Traverse City. Yeah, PJ Fleck, I think he's really good. I don't know if he reached out to Michigan State during both searches. The first one, when Michigan State hired Tucker, he had just renewed his contract at Minnesota and had like a $10 or $12 million buyout. Michigan State, some people there liked him and looked into it, and that was the deal. When Smith was hired, Fleck had just gone 6-7, so the timing wasn't good for Fleck. Timing is everything in these deals. He might have reached out on that one that year. I'm not sure. I didn't hear that. I'm not saying it did or did not happen. I never really detected that. I don't doubt it. But the 6-7 at a time when Jonathan Smith had just gone 10-3 and 8-4, things can look different in 1 year. I think he's been good. I think he's been consistent, and that's hard to do at Minnesota. So in that regard, I think he's been excellent. I think the rah-rah home team, rah-rah row the boat, ski-u-ma stuff, chemistry, all that stuff. I think that's great. And I think that, programs like Michigan State do well with that. Izzo is kind of like that. D'Antonio was a different type of stern type of thing. But I think I think there have been people in the past that have wanted him. There's been indication that he was interested in Michigan State when he first went to Minnesota and early in his Minnesota career. So I think there is some interest there. Been going on for a while. People who think that he is mid are underestimating his accomplishments and overestimating the available pool of talent in the coaching pool. You're overestimating how many good coaches are out there. There are not many available out there. You're underestimating what Fleck did. You're overestimating what else is out there. For anyone who thinks he's mid, that's crazy. And I'll tell you one thing, Michigan would not want Michigan State to hire PJ Fleck. And I'm not endorsing anything. You just asked me about him, and that's my thoughts on him. In the meantime, Jonathan Smith has a chance to make a big statement this weekend against Michigan. Smith has said that they got a chance to change the direction of the season and the program. So I'll be eager to see what that looks like on Saturday. But you asked me a question about one coach who's out there, and those are my thoughts. Question 15, Mr. X from Northport, Michigan. He says, what do you make of the radio silence on Jonathan Smith from J. Batt the past few weeks? The radio silence from Jonathan J. Batt. Hard to get a read on how much internal support Smith has at Michigan State. That's from Mr. X in Northport, Michigan. J. Batt's radio silence. I mean, athletic directors aren't usually expected to have press conferences every week, so I wouldn't call it radio silence. I agree it is hard to get a read on how much internal support Smith has. I agree with that. So I think you're right, but I don't make much out of what you call radio silence from Batt at this stage. And, nothing that Batt could say right now could help a whole lot, because anything you say has to be supportive, because you don't want to disrupt the locker room and the season and everything. And anything else, if you say anything supportive, then that's the vote of confidence, kiss of death. So either way, you can't win on that. And if you are supportive of Smith, a portion of the fan base is going to be mad at you. They'll be mad at the athletic director if he throws support behind Smith. Some of them are, because you just have a lot of pitchforks and torches. That's kind of the way it is. I mean, there's members of there's portions of the fan base that gets mad at me and became angry with me because I was supportive of Mark D'Antonio in 2017, 2018, 2019. I mean, I can handle it. I can take it. It's all right. But if you're J. Batt, at this point, saying nothing is probably the way to go. Question 16, Fishin' Dave from Moran, Michigan. I think it's pronounced Moran, Michigan. It's right over the bridge, Upper Peninsula. Is it Brevet Lake over there? Just north of Highway 2, inland a little bit. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Fishin' Dave, you got to let me know a little bit about some fishing up there too, by the way. I got some tips from somebody on Fox River a few weeks ago. I'd like to go check that out maybe next May. Fishin' Dave says, what does a coach need to do to get fired around here? He says the defense is abysmal, no fire, recruiting is a disaster. Fishin' Dave, man, you'd think Fishin' Dave would be a little more relaxed with all the fishing he does, living on that side of the bridge. Relax, gonna be okay. I don't know if it's going to be okay, but I hear you. But he says, what does a coach need to do to get fired around here? That's obviously a Darryl Rogers comment from Rogers when he was head coach of the Detroit Lions. Funny. I'm not sure recruiting is a disaster right now. We'll see what they can hold on to, but I wouldn't call it a disaster just yet because a lot of it has to do with evaluation. They're pretty good at that in their previous stops, and that could end up being better than you think, but I wouldn't say it's a disaster. As far as rankings goes, which isn't everything, but they were ranked number 29 in the country just a couple of weeks ago before a couple of those decommitments. Maybe that's what you mean, a couple of decommitments from 4 stars. I wouldn't call it a disaster just yet, though. No fire. That was certainly true against UCLA. There was some fire against USC, Nebraska, and somewhat against Indiana. So, Fish and Dave, I see you've been sworn. I've read your complaint. I understand it. I'm channeling Judge Wapner there a little bit. Understandable. Thank you for playing. Thank you for posting. Question 17, Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina, says, hey, Jim, are you a believer in the blue wall, or is this a made-up thing? He says, I figure if anyone would know and wouldn't be afraid to tell it like it is, it would be you. As a graduate of Michigan State since 1984, the things I've read over all these years, to me, it is almost comical, the difference between how Michigan is treated in the media compared to Michigan State. That's what Sparty is saying. He says, from Tunnelgate to a team wiping of their feces in the locker room, to Devin Bush, to Mozzie Smith, just in recent years, I could add in Dr. Anderson and Larry Nasser. The comparison there, but don't want to go there. He says, curious your thoughts on this, as there is not a better time than rivalry week to bring it up. I would hate to see if Michigan State cheated as bad as Michigan did the last few years and how the Detroit media would have spun that. That's from Sparty in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Nice little commentary from him. Blue wall, yeah, there used to be a blue wall for sure. Joe Falls admitted as such late in his career that he loved Michigan and wanted them to be better than Michigan State. He wrote that in writing in one of his last columns. He was a huge columnist in the Detroit News, and sports editor of the Detroit News. But newspapers don't have as much power now as they did back then. There's more outlets now, so even if the blue wall still exists, it wouldn't matter as much. In the 1970s and 80s, Michigan dominated the newspapers in Detroit, dominated Detroit television channels, and the talk shows. WJR dominated WJR. Sports Rap was like the only talk show at that time. There was no internet, so they controlled all those outlets, and to their credit, made it work. Now, maybe Detroit television channels, I don't watch those. I'm not in the Detroit area, so I don't see what's going on there, but people don't watch local television as much anymore anyway, although they should. I think there's 2 really good channels here in the Lansing area for coverage of high school sports, among other things that people should check out. Channel 6 and Channel 10, I think, are really good in Lansing. The impact of the smaller number a small number of outlets back in the 70s and 80s. Detroit News, Detroit Free Press, WJR, the Detroit TV channels. Those outlets had such a bigger impact on a larger percentage of the public and in the state of Michigan than they do now. After the 87 Rose Bowl, for instance, Joe Falls, seemed like personally set out to try to smear Michigan State's Rose Bowl by breaking the steroid story. And the steroid story was true, but would he have been so inclined to pursue something like that if it had been Michigan? My guess is no way. But it was, it was good reporting by Joe and Dave Dye at the time. There's an Fred Gerard was his name, investigative reporter of the Detroit News back in the 80s. And I remember he had this ridiculous series about Michigan State's academics, like in the early 1990s, trying to poke holes in Michigan State's football program by reporting that an uncommon percentage of football players were majoring in criminal justice. Like that was a bad thing. Michigan State's criminal justice department was one of the best in the country. And a lot of these players come from backgrounds where they want to go back and help in that area, where there be, social workers helping with disadvantaged youths and so forth. So Fred Gerard of the Detroit News, one of the all-time jackasses in media. And he had the maybe a good reporter. He worked hard and so forth. But I thought that was completely out of line. Maybe his bosses made him write from that angle, and maybe he stood up against it if he had the sense to realize what he was writing was just buffoonery. But anyway, that was part of the blue wall. Fred Gerard, the criminal justice story that he wrote as like it was a slam against Michigan State, when the actual, what he was accusing Michigan State of doing was actually going on at Michigan with, with their version of a kinesiology major. When Jim Harbaugh was at Stanford, Harbaugh criticized Michigan for having too many players in fake majors, for lack of a better word. I mean, that was going on at Michigan, not Michigan State, and they made it look like Michigan State was doing it. Fred Gerard attempted to do that at the Detroit News. And I was in the room when Michigan State was investigated for illegal donor activity. What was the guy's name? Sam Calloway in Florida back in the early 90s in the Perlis era. Fred Gerard led a lot of those investigations also and did a good job as a reporter. And Michigan State, the punishment was coming down, and it was announced in a room of reporters on a conference call speaker. And Fred Gerard was in the room, and he was visibly disappointed that the punishment was not greater. That's what I saw with my own eyes. And he was asking questions back to the NCAA the NCAA Rules and Fractions Committee chair that spoke that day. And he was asking questions back to him in a very stern manner, which reporters should do. But I thought that he really looked like he had his feelings hurt, that his reporting didn't create more of a punishment against Michigan State. That's the way I remember it. And you match that up to that ridiculous series of articles he had about Michigan State's criminal justice program. And that guy, I haven't seen him. I don't know what he is. I don't know if he's still in the business or not. But yeah, he was part of the Blue Wall. He was a soldier in the Blue Wall. I don't know if Falls was the sports editor at the time or not, but there's no question that there was an agenda there. Falls admitted as much. Question 18. U.S. Army ATC from Denver, Colorado says, do any of Izzo's sentiments regarding the portal and teams athletes needing to develop together translate as a concern in football? Is that something coaches need to be more worried about, or is it largely irrelevant in the new landscape? What are your thoughts? Do any of Izzo's sentiments regarding the portal and teams athletes needing to develop together translate as a concern in football? Yeah, you need camaraderie, you need togetherness, you need mindset. That's all critical in football and in basketball. It's harder to achieve in the current climate with players coming and going. Harbaugh achieved it at Michigan. They all bought in team, and that's a big reason they had a lot of success late in his career. And the greatest thing he did at Michigan, I mean, that team quit on him in 2020, COVID year against Wisconsin. They quit. And the way they came back, now, yeah, they cheated. That helped. But in terms of the cohesiveness they had, a team attitude, they achieved that, and that was part of their secret sauce. Ohio State came together last year. After they lost to Michigan, they circled the wagons and rebounded. I think togetherness had something to do there. Now, who has that type of togetherness now? Nationally, that remains to be seen. I'll be curious to see. Someone's going to emerge, and these days when you can't put together a super team like Georgia had for a couple of years, like LSU had for a year or two, like Alabama had in several years, like Ohio State had last year. Maybe Ohio State is still a super team. Maybe they're one of the last. I know Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman theorized that the era of the super team is over because of the transfer portal. And I agree with that. I'm just not sure that tide has totally come in yet. Maybe Ohio State's still a super team. I think there's more parity at the top. I think the top 2 or 3 teams in the country are not as dominant over teams ranked 9, 10, 11, and 12 as was the case just 5, 10 years ago. So now teams that can get, last year, like at Maryland, Loxley said he lost his locker room, partly because he had freshmen coming in making more money than veteran players and lost his locker room. So he set out to do a better job with that this year. And Maryland's been better this year. They've been improved. They've got a really good quarterback, a freshman who I think is an NFL quarterback. But handling the locker room is a big deal with differing financials and differing players thinking about their own brand and so forth. So those coaches that can take all those elements and still get like an old school team mentality, They are going to have an edge. That is going to be a secret sauce for them. That was a secret sauce for Michigan State basketball last year, to your point. Dabo Swinney was trying to do that at Clemson by not bringing in as many transfers, and it has not worked out. I don't know about inner locker room stuff at various programs around the country. I thought at Indiana when Tom Allen was there, they had great camaraderie there. That one good season they had, what was it, 2020, 2022? I can't remember what season it was. Then it vanished by 2023. His players loved him and all that stuff, and it worked for a while, but then, that vanished quickly. So who has it right now? I've not watched them closely, but I'm guessing Vanderbilt has great camaraderie. I'm guessing Virginia has great camaraderie and togetherness. I'm guessing Northwestern with a 5-2 record, I'm guessing they've got great togetherness and camaraderie. Michigan State needs it. They've tried to form it and nurture it and bring it along. How much you can do that when you've had 70 new players over the course of 2 years, really hard to do. Smith, I do think, really does care about his players, and I think the players feel that, sense that, and get that. Smith is doing that not only because he cares about the people, but also because he believes that it can lead to a competitive advantage on the field. Haven't seen it work yet, but Michigan State's tried to do that. It is a big factor in football. But in the meantime, you got to be on the same page on defense. You got to block and tackle and all those things, and we'll see if Michigan State can do that better this weekend against Michigan. The UCLA game 2 weeks ago was a must-win situation. Michigan State didn't come through. This is another must-win situation, but now you're a big underdog. Michigan is good, not great. And Michigan State's got a great opportunity, but also backs against the wall also. So a wounded animal is a dangerous animal. Can Michigan State be that kind of wounded animal this weekend? Yes, they can, but you got to be on the same page and hit your run fits and gap integrity and communicate and those things. And we've not seen that demonstrated yet. We'll see if they can do it this weekend. If they do, they've got a chance. If they don't, it's going to be more of the same. We appreciate everybody and all the questions today at SpartanMag Live. We will see you next week. If you see me on the stadium, say hello on Saturday. Appreciate all the support, all the maggers out there. Everybody take care of each other. Be smart this weekend. Be good. Dress warm. Wear some layers. Maybe some rain gear too. We'll see you later. Everybody take care of yourself.